Not a bad day on Tuesday. Here on the video report, taking a split with the complimentary plays, losing with Tennessee. What a shocker. They're a double-digit favorite. Losing at home to South Carolina, a team that I had a best bet on in its previous game at home against Missouri on Saturday. But I think the Volunteers clearly, as I was worried about yesterday, and one of the reasons I didn't use them as my premium best bet, may have been caught looking ahead to Saturday's big game at Rupp Arena, and it cost Rick Barnes' team dearly. And again, the problem when you play South Carolina, they play at such a slow tempo. They take the air out of the ball and they limit the number of your possessions, but then cashed in with the easy complimentary winner with Michigan State hammering Michigan. And you can pretty much write off Juwan Howard's coaching career, I think, in Ann Arbor. I can't imagine he's going to survive this season, or definitely going to be gone at the end of the year. But more importantly, my best bet, Illinois. I thought it was just a ridiculous price for the Illini. Sure, they were coming off the overtime loss at Northwestern in their previous road game, and they didn't look that good in their last home game against Indiana. But 2.5, and then eventually that game went to 3 at Ohio State, a team that had lost 5 of its last 6. I just couldn't figure out that price. I rode the Illini, and they won by 12 against the Buckeyes in Columbus. And it just goes to show you again, there are some handicappers in this business, and I've heard it many times over the years. They hold it against a team when they cost them money. Like they'll say something ridiculous like, oh, not going to use them because they screwed me the last time. Think about the logic in that statement. Did the team screw them the last time, or did you screw yourself by backing that team? It's just one of the most asinine statements possibly made. Don't hold it against the team because you were stupid enough to put your money on them and they lost. You're eliminating a possible good bet the next time on the card. Now, I've got a couple of complimentary plays for you coming up here in a moment, but I just want to talk about college basketball betting now. We have now had at least about 6 weeks of conference play, right? We are going into the home stretch here. We're turning the calendar tomorrow into February, and we've got a good 4.5, 5 maybe weeks before we get into college conference tournament action, and then March Madness awaits us. So if you're doing this on your own and you're not using my professional advice or any of the professional advice of the handicappers over at DeMarcosports.com, why you aren't is beyond me, okay? Something you should consider. Listen, there are go-to teams that you should be looking at religiously. There are go-to conferences that you should be going to and dipping your fingers or your feet into those wells repeatedly. And what I mean is this. I start out the season and there are always teams and conferences I'm more familiar with. But in the opening 2 months of the year, there are certain teams that replace those teams. And there are certain teams that I keep constantly becoming more familiar with in their conferences as well. Last year, I did great in the WAC. Did pretty good in the Big West. Have you seen many WAC and Big West plays from me this year? No. Instead, suddenly I found myself doing extremely well in the Mid-American Conference. It's a conference I loathe. Year after year, I do exceptionally well in the Horizon and the Missouri Valley Conference. This year, I've added the Big Ten and the SEC to my arsenal. But if you ask me, like a couple of you folks last night asked my opinion about TCU and Texas Tech, damned if I know about those two teams. The next win I have on either one of them this year will be the first. To paraphrase the phrase, dance with the girl you brought. Because at this stage, you should have a bucket full of teams. There are 350 plus Division I teams. You only need about a bucket full of maybe about 12 to 20 teams that you should be going to constantly, those that you should be familiar with repeatedly. It's repetition and consistency that allow you to make money when you're gambling. It's what makes baseball such an easy sport to bet. Because every 4th or 5th day, certain pitchers are going to go. Teams are playing 3-game or 4-game series. Repetition and consistency. It's what makes the NBA playoffs so good. Because it's the only time of the year where teams are going to give maximum effort and they're going to play 5-7 games. What makes it so easy. And the irony of it all is that if I was to tell you in our business model, 100% of the betting public and those that buy the picks at the sites will do so for NFL and college football and for March Madness. And then that circle is reduced to about 30% for the NBA playoffs, and then it drops down to 10% for baseball. The easiest sport to make money on, but the hardcore gamblers are the only ones that bet it. Go figure. It's the time you should be betting in baseball, right? NBA playoffs, the time you should be betting, because that's the time you build your bankroll. So when football rolls around in September, you're playing with somebody else's money. But handicappers and guys in this business put their gone fishing sign up on the wall and take off too. I've never understood it. Anyway, again, repetition and consistency, that's the key. And in college basketball, you narrow down that bucket of teams, and you should have at this time. So tomorrow, yes, there are times you will see teams and suddenly you go, hey, maybe this is a team that I want to add to that little collection, and you do so. But if you haven't dipped your toes into the Big West or the WAC at this point, what the hell are you doing? Okay, let's get to your complimentary plays. Here's an interesting game here tonight that I came real close to using as my best bet, and I'll tell you why I didn't. Richmond is a 2.5-point favorite at Fordham. My God, a team that has won 10 straight games is only a 2.5-point chalk. A team that has won 10 straight and covered in 9 of those 10, their longest winning streak since winning 22 straight games since 1934-35. You remember that Spiders winning streak from 34-35. I mean, it was a hell of a run, wasn't it? My mom wasn't even alive in 34 or 35. Anyway, yeah, that's how many they've won. 10 in a row, dating back to a loss to Florida back on December 9th. But why are they only a 2.5-point favorite going to Bronx to Rose Hill Gymnasium, a little bandbox? I've been there once, did play-by-play there once many, many years ago. And a Fordham team that's 9-11 straight up, 4-7 straight up at home in the Bronx, coming off a 9-point loss at Duquesne. Why are they such a prohibitive small favorite? Could be that in their road wins in Atlantic 10 action, they only won by 2 at Loyola of Chicago, by 2 at Duquesne, by 5 in overtime at Davidson. They've certainly played it close, but more importantly, I think it's because it's the classic letdown, look ahead situation. They're coming off the home upset of then number 16 Dayton as a 4-point underdog, 69-64 on Saturday, a game in which they missed their first 11 shots. They found themselves down 9-0. They roared back for the win, snapped Dayton's then national best 13-game winning streak, played great defense, which is what they do, held Dayton just 33.9% from the field, and took first place away from the Flyers in the Atlantic 10 because they're now a perfect 7-0 in conference play. And the look ahead, they're at Virginia Commonwealth on Saturday. If you know anything about these two teams, this is the huge rivalry game, Richmond VCU, and Richmond got clobbered in last year's last meeting by the Rams. So look ahead, a letdown situation, a classic scenario. And yet, as my earbud drops out of my ear, hold on 1 second. Hopefully you didn't lose the audio there. And yet, I still think they're a great play tonight, and I came this close to using them. So Richmond would be your top play tonight, minus the 2.5, because I'm just not that impressed with Fordham. But it's going to be a low-scoring game, probably in the 60s, and I still like Richmond. Now, over in the NBA, the Clippers are a 12.5-point favorite. Oh, no, let's talk about Minnesota. I'm sorry, a 13.5-point favorite overnight. They're now 13. God knows why that line has gone down and hasn't skyrocketed. Has Minnesota played well over the past couple of weeks? No, because that's why Chris Finch, their head coach, has ripped them on a number of occasions. But they're coming off a hard-fought 107-100 win at Oklahoma City on Monday. But tonight, they're hosting the Dallas Mavericks. These two have met 3 times previously this season. And the Mavericks are going to be a little shorthanded, to say the least. Kyrie, Luka, and Derek Lively II are all out. Dante Exum remains doubtful. And the Mavericks are coming off a 131-129 win over Orlando on Monday, in which Luka had 45 points, 15 rebounds, 15 assists and 9 rebounds. And Lively, who's played great as a rookie out of Duke this year, had 20 points and 11 rebounds, but suffered a broken nose in that contest. So here, I think you have to go ahead and lay the points with Minnesota. Now, I will say this. When Irving and Luka missed the December 28th meeting, Minnesota struggled to win that game, 118 to 110, because you'd think it would be an easy walkover win. But in that game, Tim Hardaway erupted for 32 points. And listen, it's the way you have to always consider things in the NBA, because sometimes guys look at the lineup of the opposing team and go, hey, no Kyrie, no Luka. Hey, 3/5 of the starting lineup for the Mavericks are out. This is a cakewalk. And Minnesota has certainly done a number of cakewalk games here recently, and they've played so poorly. But still, I think Minnesota's a damn good play, minus 13, because the Mavericks just don't have a lot of offensive firepower here going into this contest. Another interesting game here, and one which I think you have to stay away from. Just a heads up. Indiana State is an 8.5-point favorite at Belmont, right? Indiana State is 18-3 on the season, 13-7 against the spread. Beat the hell out of Belmont, 94-64, back on January 13th at home. So why is this a stay away game considering how good the Sycamores have been? Well, because they have a big revenge game coming up against Drake. On Saturday, they host the Drake Bulldogs. Indiana State is number 1 in the conference, 9-1. Drake is number 2 at 8-2. So even though it's a damn cheap price, even though they won the first meeting by 30 points, this is a game that I would certainly stay away from. And Indiana State is coming off a 95-86 overtime win against Bradley to extend their current winning streak to 5 in a row, a streak that extends back to their 11-point loss to Drake in the first meeting of the season. So that was an interesting game, but I think that you have to stay away from that one. So your official complimentary plays tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I love Richmond and lean toward the Minnesota Timberwolves. That'll do it. Wish you well, and talk to you again tomorrow.